Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Gabby Anderson on the podcast, another fellow Minnesotan. Oh my God, I'm just overjoyed to talk to another one of us out there that, just understands what it's like living in the upper Midwest. Like I told you before, all these people on the coast and all these other places have no idea. But before we get into that, because I might start, crying and just thinking about, what it's going to be like once the weather comes in November or such. Gabby, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, I ask this question all the time, even though I know what the weather's like. What is the weather like today?
It's actually beautiful. It's not too humid, which in Minnesota, sometimes we kind of get that over humidity. So it was kind of raining this morning, but it cleared up and it ended up being beautiful.
I mean, I'll take it over what it was like last week, where I had to wait until about 9 o'clock at night to go out on my cardio at night because it was
Yep.
just 103 degrees and then 98. So I will absolutely take it. And yeah, we are getting, looks like it's a few good weeks ahead of weather. But before I depress everyone, with the weather stories, because good God, I have dozens of them, and she probably has just the same amount as me. Gabby, why don't you first off just give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and eventually, become a bodybuilder?
Yeah, so I was in sports throughout my entire high school career. I did gymnastics, swimming, tennis, softball for 10 years. So I was kind of always in some form of athletics. After high school, I didn't go to college right away. So to kind of keep myself active, I was in the gym, definitely not like I am now, not as dedicated as I am now, but I had some background because my dad was actually a competitive power lifter and personal trainer himself. So I had background, but nutrition wasn't super big to me because I still wanted to eat what I wanted. Um, and then I actually had a good friend of mine. Hi.
Hello.
Her name is Emma. She's the one that came to me and was like, "Hey, you should do this show with me." And
So she's the one responsible. This is all her fault.
yeah, yep. She's my roommate right now. But she came to me and was like, "Hey, you should do this show with me." And at first, I was like, "No, I don't." I knew the dedication it was going to take. I didn't necessarily want to commit it yet. And then after a couple of weeks, I was like, "Okay, fine." So we both prepped. We both got ready for a show. We actually did our first show together. The thing I like about this sport is it's not you compete and you're done. Like even if you don't place where you wanted to, that's fine. You just go get better and come back.
Well, and I'll take the negative out of that, though, is that this is also a sport where you're never good enough and you always have to improve. So that's one thing that I look at. I mean, I've talked to some of the most in shape people on the planet, and they're still telling me, like, oh, I really need to work on this. I need to work on that. I was like, just look in a damn mirror, for God's
Yeah.
sakes. But that's like with a lot of sports, though. But before you got into this, bodybuilding, were there any concerns that you had about it? Because unfortunately, like the general public, there's so many myths about the sport. And then when you add the female side to it, I mean, it just gets multiplied by 10. Were there any concerns that you had, or was it one of those things where you just want to dive right in and see what happens?
I didn't have a ton of concerns going into it. I think as I got further into it, that's when, because going into it at first, I wasn't super familiar with all aspects of bodybuilding. When it came down to it, I was just kind of like, I'm going to work out and I'm going to watch my macros, and that was it. But there's so much more into it that I learned over the last few years when it comes to like supplements, our cycles, how important the sleep is, and all of that kind of stuff. And being a woman, we need to make sure that our hormones are still good and that our body's functioning the way that it's supposed to be. So when something happens or like you miss your time of the month, that's one of those things where you kind of go, something's not operating right then. Let's go get our blood work done, kind of figure it out, because it's not normal to lose it. And that's not the goal. You don't want to get to a point where you lose your time of the month. So that was really something to look at, something that's gotten a lot bigger, kind of talked about within females in bodybuilding, just because, I mean, it is an important part of you as a woman. And it's just another important part of your body that you need to make sure is operating correctly.
I mean, if I could go back and tell myself 4 years ago that there are going to be about 30 to 40 women on your podcast discussing their periods, I don't know what myself would say, but hey, it's part of the territory that you go in with because yeah, like people don't understand when you get that lean, it changes your hormones in your body. And first of all, as a guy, I know this sounds really stupid, and I've gotten blasted for saying this in the past. Like I didn't even know that guys even had hormones in the first place. Like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, isn't that just something that like women go and get checked up like with doctors and stuff like that? They're like, no, you have them too. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So like just even learning about the whole hormonal side of the sport is such a, especially on the women's side, it's just so important to be able to, get all that straightened out. But when you were also getting into the sport, I mean, this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. And for all the compliments that you'll get, like, oh my God, you look amazing, no one really truly understands the mental side of this sport unless you compete in it. Because, I mean, for anything that you do physically, the mental stuff is 100 times more important. What has this journey been like for you mentally?
Mentally, when I first started, I'm kind of a pretty laid back person. So I was just kind of doing what I was told, and I didn't really have any issues with like hunger or being fatigued. I mean, I hated running. I still hate running, but I had to fight myself and like, nope, this is what she wants you to do. You have to go do it. So kind of fought through that. And this last year was definitely my hardest prep that I've had in the 3 years that I've done it. I went through an actual bulking phase where in the years previous I didn't really go. I went through a bulking phase, but not like I did this past time because with like COVID and stuff, I was basically more in a prep for like 2 years. So nothing really changed that drastically for me. And then we got into an actual bulk after my shows last year, and I did 8 months of bulking. I went from, 110 on stage to about 135. And, you got to drop all of it now. So it was, and then it's dropping that weight, but not losing the muscle. And so mentally, there was definitely days that, I don't want to go to the gym. I want a brownie. And I want to go eat whatever I want. And it's definitely a constant battle just to stay focused, stay consistent. Because even if you're not motivated, because no one can tell you that they're motivated 100% of the time, because no one is. We're human. But you're consistent. So as long as you keep that consistency in your head, like even this past Sunday, I didn't want to go to the gym. And I was going with my dad and I'm like, I don't know, Dad, like I'll come with you next week. I think I'm just, going to take it easy. And I ended up going because that consistency now is like instilled in me, and like that mental game of like, no, you got to go. It's in your program. You got to do it. So it's the other hard part that I see is just the mental game with competing, being on stage in general. In this sport, you're going to lose more than you win. And like me, I'm actually really competitive. I mean, I was in a ton of sports growing up. So it's kind of, your ego takes a check every once in a while because sometimes there's going to be someone out there better than you. And 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to win that class. And that's okay because everybody is out there working just as hard, So the mental game of, you're not going to get first every time, but keeping then that positivity and that using that momentum to go back in the gym, take the judges' feedback, get better at what they said is really just a driver if you let it be.
Yeah. I mean, just yeah, the whole mental side. I could do a whole 10-hour podcast on it because it's just so vast, and especially when you're in a sport where you're judged with others. I mean, that mental side just gets multiplied ridiculously. But you mentioned that you trained with your dad. Other than your dad, what was the rest of your family and friends' reaction like when you announced them? Like, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder. That's not something that a lot of people hear.
um, I mean, my dad, like I said, he was all for it. He competitive powerlifting for years when he was younger. So he was all for it. My friends were like, "Oh, cool." I mean, they didn't really know what that entailed because I kind of already went to the gym, just not as seriously as I do now. I think the hardest part for them was my lifestyle change with like I no longer drank. I brought my food everywhere. I was totally fine going out, but it was just different. They were used to me, having drinks with them, going to bars at night, and I can't tell you the last time I had alcohol now. And now, being like 3 years later, it's kind of a known that, like, oh, yep, Gabby's not drinking and Gabby's not eating unless she like tells us otherwise, pretty much. Um, so they've definitely gotten used to it. It was kind of a curve for a while. My mom is still a little iffy when we have like holidays and stuff like that. If I'm in my bulking season, it doesn't matter. I get to eat. But like my birthday's in April, usually I'm cutting by then. So they'll be like, "Oh, where do you want to go?" And I'll pick somewhere that has like sushi because I can eat sushi. And they're like, "Well, that's all you're gonna eat." And she's like, "You're gonna come out and you're not gonna eat," and blah blah blah. And it's so that's kind of the same, but it is what it is. The lifestyle is a lifestyle, and especially for someone, like my mom's never done anything like that, so I wouldn't expect her to like be right on board right away. I think it's always going to kind of be different in family settings just because like I do bring my own food and they're, eating off the table and I'm heating up my stuff in the microwave. And luckily though, my younger brother has recently gotten into it. So now she has it at home. So I think that's also helping.
Well, I mean, your younger brother's gonna be like, "There's no way my sister's gonna be stronger than me." So I gotta up my game and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of sibling pressure with a lot of these bodybuilders I have on too. With the siblings, like they're almost forced to get into the gym. Then where they're like, "Okay, I can't have." But that is great. That I mean, it's happening more in the home because, like, yeah, you can't expect some people to like be fully into this lifestyle because, like, yeah, you're bringing your food with you sometimes. Which, first of all, you'd be my favorite person because that's one less person to cook for. So I would just be like, okay, yeah, go ahead, yeah. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, yeah, they just look at that. Especially, well, I'm one of those people where I don't even care if I would have been on a diet or anything like that. If it's holidays, I'm choking it down, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
I understand that dedication, and that's a lot. Again, this drive and this dedication for the sport is one thing that a lot of people just do not understand how that is able to happen, especially on those days, like you said, like on that Sunday or last Sunday when you were just didn't have that drive and that motivation. But I also love to talk genetics on this podcast because so many times, oh my God, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back, and you just strangle them because
Yeah.
you can train just like someone, you can eat just like them, you can do everything like them. You're not going to see the same results as them, unfortunately, just because everyone is built differently. But on top of that, everyone always has that one body part that really, really takes off when they get started working out. And then they have that one body part that just drags behind it. They have to train to oblivion when they get started off. What was one body part that took off for you, and what was one body part that you just had to drag behind?
Shoulders. My upper body was like that. And that's definitely genetics. My dad is built the exact same way. It's just how, especially like even when I'm leaning out, when I
You got the
start,
dancer traps too, basically, is what it is.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just like the shoulders
Yeah.
came in pretty quick. They've never really got, and like through my 8-month bulk, I didn't do shoulders. So like they're just there. The body part that's my hardest for sure is hamstrings and glutes. It's where I hold all of the fat to the very last percent. But when I'm cutting, I do 3 leg days a week that are specific to glute and hamstring. I don't really touch quads. Just in my division, it's not something they look for, but they do look for hamstring tie-ins, glutes. I mean, like the saying is bikinis one from the back. So that was definitely something from my last show last year that I already knew I had to get better. I had to get it bigger. I had to get leaner for the next time. We just had to put on the size. And then going into this cut, we had to get just as lean, if not leaner, than I was before. So the legs are the bane of my existence.
I mean, I'm 6'3", so I'm right there with you. I mean, my legs, I've always made the joke, I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they're not going to gain ounce. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. Calves don't even get me started. I could be that guy that does 10,000 calf raises a day and, they're just not. Yeah. So I am right there with you. And yeah, legs. Anyone out there has any tips on legs other than just training them to oblivion, which is the answer that I've heard on here, is like anyone, just come up with a secret leg workout. Let me know, please, because I will be more than happy to incorporate it.
Yeah.
with me. But yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned nutrition. What were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made when you started to get into shape, other than, like having to go out and eat and like bring your own food? What were the, like, on like the food side, what was probably one of the toughest challenges for you?
I mean, the toughest challenge for me this last time was I had to. So when we're going into a show, we have to watch our sodium intake, because sodium can really fluctuate your weight. It can cause you to hold water, X, Y, Z. Um, so my food was completely plain. I did not season any of my meat. I did not
How did
add.
you survive?
I know. That's when I say this last prep was my hardest. That's part of it. I mean, it was plain chicken, plain ground turkey, and I was eating the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it was just chicken, rice, ground turkey, rice. And then I had some Southwest egg beaters in there, which gave some flavor at least. But other than that, it was really plain. And because for me and my body, that's what I needed to do to get it to where I needed it to be in the short amount of time that we had. This last time, I didn't lean as quickly as I had in the past because we were kind of taking down the cardio. So with just walking, I didn't lean as quick. So when we're, 2 weeks out, 1 week out, and I still have 4 to 5 pounds to drop, you got to cut everything. And then your cardio goes up to like 50 minutes to an hour. And it's part of what you got to do. Other than that, like when my calories are higher, I'm higher on carbs and that kind of, usually I'm in the like 230, 240 range for carbs when I'm bulking. And I personally am not like a foodie, so I don't spend a ton of time like meal prepping or making these like extravagant meals and stuff. I'm pretty lazy when it comes to it. So I'm more of a like, if it's easy and I can eat it and leave, that's what I'm going to do. This next bulking season, I'm going to try to get better at having like more tasty stuff for sure. Because there's like so much out there that you can do that's healthy and that can hit your macros. And you don't have to eat plain if you don't want to. If you want to and it works for you, great. I'm also one of those people that I can eat the same thing for months. So I don't get sick of things very easily, which it's another really hard thing for people to get past is it's tough to eat the same thing every day in, day out for months. I don't have that. I'm totally fine with it. It's also food that I know works well with my body and that like I'm not going to bloat from or like my stomach's not going to get upset because there's a lot of food sensitivities out there too. So the cleaner it is, the easier your body's going to digest it. So that's why I've usually been pretty even when it comes to food. I do season my chicken and stuff and my bulking.
Thank God.
And I do use sauces and stuff when I'm bulking and that kind of thing. And even now I have about 14 and a half weeks before my next show. So I put salsa into my meals and stuff. So like we put in some more flavor at least.
I just can't imagine going through. I mean, I've had a handful of guests do a prep where they were just eating plain. They didn't put any sauce or anything like that. How do you do that mentally? Because I know you said that you can eat stuff for forever, but like, I don't care what anyone says. If you have plain chicken breasts and plain turkey, for anyone, even after like a month or so, like it will get to you.
Yeah, I mean, when my coach first made the switch of like, hey, no more seasoning, no more, basically taking everything out of my meal plan but the food. It was tough the first few days. It was, I mean, because chicken gets dry on its own and it's not great without anything on it. But then it kind of just clicks in you that food is no longer being used to be enjoyed. It's being used as a tool at this point. And at the point I was at, it was no longer like, hey, you're probably not going to like this, but you're using it as a tool at this point, and there is no other connection to it. So that's kind of how I got through it. It's just this is this is my goal. This is what I have to do to get there.
That's why bodybuilders are different than the general public, everyone. They always talk about, like, what makes a bodybuilder so different. They're able to do that. That's one of the prime examples right there that I like to point out.
Yeah.
They're able to put themselves through that. So, I mean, and again, if you want to get those results, unfortunately, sometimes you do have to do that kind of extremes when it comes to your food. But before I get into talking about competitions, I mean, being a fellow Minnesotan, how do you deal with this lifestyle during the winters? Because I'm one of those people where you will never see me lean during the winter because, first of all, you feel bad enough as it is when you're super lean. But if you go out and it's negative 20 degrees and you're lean, it is the worst experience you can probably ever have. But just being able to keep this motivation when you just look outside and it's like 10 degrees outside and you have like a foot and a half of snow, how do you keep that motivation? Because I know a lot of people up here at least struggle with that during the winter months of like, I just want to sit by a fireplace and drink hot cocoa all day.
Yeah, I mean, winters are tough. I mean, in Minnesota, they're long. It's, 7, 8 months it can get to, and it's cold and it's cloudy and it's not,
It's
it's
just
tough.
depressing is the best word I can say for it. Like, for anyone
Yeah,
who's never
I
been here,
mean,
it's just depressing. Yeah.
it is. So, I mean, you look outside, well, and then it's dark at 4.
Yep.
So it's my hardest time is definitely when it starts getting darker earlier because then I feel like my day is gone when the sun's not out anymore. So then when I'm in the gym, if I have to go later, if I have to go at like 5 and it's already dark, and then I come out from the gym an hour and a half later, 2 hours later, and it's pitch black, and like, it's only like 7, but it feels like it's 11 and my day is gone. Like that's it. And it definitely gets harder to keep that motivation going in that kind of climate. My easiest part is that, usually in the winter I'm bulking. And I love bulking because it's shorter workouts, but you're lifting heavy. You're trying to PR and progressive overload when you go in. And so that kind of keeps me excited to go. And then like changing up my workouts because I'll keep my workouts for usually they last for like 4 months. I'll do like one workout or a split, I should say, and then they'll get switched up. So like getting that switch in, having new things to do, new PRs to hit, see how much I can do on this. It definitely helps. And then if you can, and not everybody has the availability to, but like if you can go in the middle of the day in the winter, I would definitely recommend it because it's sunny, it's bright, it doesn't make you feel so like that because it's not dark yet. I luckily work from home 3 days out of the week, so I'm able to go on those days in the afternoon and get my stuff in and get it done. So that helps me. And I mean, if you can't go in the middle of the day, it's just a matter of either because for a while before I started working from home, I started going in the morning instead of at night. And that kind of helped curve that for me of feeling like my day was gone because I was starting my day at the gym rather than ending it.
Meanwhile, I am a night owl, so I have to work out at night basically, or later in the day, like around like 3 or 4, kind of like around there. Like I've tried early in the morning, and oh my god, it's horrible. But you mentioned changing workouts. I made the rookie mistake of between the ages of 17 and 20 doing the same workouts for 3 years straight. And
Okay.
then after about 1 year, just noticing like, hey, my changes aren't really happening as quickly. What's going on? And then by that third year, you're doing about maybe having about 10% of the change of what you would have. It's so everyone, yeah, make sure that you're changing things up after a while because eventually, yeah, you'll be like, oh my god, I'm doing the same thing and I'm doing it just as hard as I was before, and your body gets used to it. Everyone, so make sure that you change up those workouts. That's one of the keys there. But I mean, let's be honest, posing is the hardest thing for so many of the guests that I have on, and I would have never guessed it in a million years. What has your experience with posing been like?
It's hard. I mean, when I first when I first started, I mean, you look at you look at pros and even other NPC athletes on stage and they make it look easy. I mean, it's like, oh, well, that can't be that hard. Like they're just standing there and twirling their arms and whatever. And it is bikini posing. Obviously, we don't have to be like flexed up like the other divisions do, but It is all in our lower back because we have to keep our glutes up all of the time. No matter if we're facing forward, we're side, doesn't matter. Our glutes, our lower back is curved up that entire time. So it's such a tight knot in your lower back. And then it's also getting the mobility in your core to twist because you're standing with your hips sideways, but you have to turn your shoulders forward. So that, and then there's the arms and your hands, and it's, keep your hands like loose closed, like don't do this and don't have them open. Make sure your arm is laying flat, your wrist is out, not in. Make sure your hair isn't covering your shoulders. It's like all of these little things that if you don't do it, you would never know that. You would never know all the little details that go into it. And I mean, even going into my most recent shows, tweaks were still being made. And that's the other hard part with posing is like you can watch videos on how to pose, but it doesn't mean that that's right for your body. And it doesn't mean that that's right for the way you look. That's good for her, but it doesn't mean that's going to flatter you best. So going into these shows as I get leaner and leaner and leaner, like my foot will change, how I'm angling it. Am I keeping my knees straight? Am I bending them a little bit? How far am I twisting? Am I hiding a shoulder? Like it's all these little things start to change and come into play. And then it's like you have a week to remember those things.
Again, that's part of the mental game, and that's part of, like I was telling her before, like most people do not understand that this sport, there's so many little things in it that, especially with posing, where I mean we could do a whole dig on in posing, but one thing especially with bikini compares that I found that like separates them from a lot of the other divisions, you have to have like your own flair, you have to have your own, pizzazz, and that's something that people aren't born with, or I mean that's something that people are either born with or they're not. I really come to feel like it's hard to teach that. Was that something that you always had, or was that something that like you've had to try to develop sort of your own flair or pizzazz?
um, I think there was some of it in there just because, like, I was a cheerleader in high school. So, and typically from what I've seen, a lot of bikini competitors were cheerleaders or they were in beauty pageants or dance, gymnastics, stuff like that, that was kind of solo. Um, Me, I'm not super girly like a lot of women are, and there's a lot like me too, but like I'm just not that girly. So when I did my first show, like my friends seeing me like glammed up, extensions
What the
in,
hell's she doing in that bikini up there?
yeah,
Jesus.
I mean they were like it didn't even look like you. Like I've never seen you look like that. And it's yeah, because I don't typically look like that. um and it just all those little things that I had to get better at. I wasn't very flowy. Like you have to kind of be flowy so it looks pretty on stage, and I was very rigid. When it came to like when you bring your arms around, like you have to like do it all nice and pretty. And I've gotten better, but when I started, it was more of like a kind of like cheering, like it was straight down. And since I've gotten better, we've added like some more things to kind of bring sass into it. Because when you first start, just get the basics down. No, get a posing coach, just get the front pose, side pose, back pose, call it a day. Because I didn't look at anything else. We didn't add anything else other than just the basics in my first round. And now going into this one, as I was more comfortable in those poses, now it was like, okay, when you come to the side, give them one of these and, a little hair flip. So you kind of like, as you get more comfortable in doing it, you add those flares, you add the sass that you see those pros have. And I think something to remember is like when you watch a pro and they're flipping their hair and they're, doing their little shrugs and that kind of stuff. I mean, they've been doing it for years. They are at that point. It is not something that is required to do well in the NPC level. So
Well, and like you talked about, I mean, being someone who isn't like a self-described girly girl, what was that like, sort of discovering your inner girly girl? Because I mean, that's like if someone were to ask me, like, be like the most flamboyant person ever on stage. It's like it's hard for some people to develop something that's not like naturally what they're like. Do you think that? How did you deal with sort of just exploring a different side of you personality wise?
It was funny, we were actually me and a teammate, my coach, were just talking about it because we were, staying in our hotel, and the girl I was competing with is very girly. She's very feminine. She's beautiful. My coach is the same way, very feminine, beautiful girl. And I was like, "Oh, I got girlier," but I'm not quite there. Like they're really good at doing like the stage glam makeup. I can't. It's just not in me. I don't I don't know how to do it. So they definitely like they helped me. My coach did my makeup because if I did it, like it's not that it would look bad, it's just not dark enough and you need like super dark, glammed out makeup for those lights and that's not my forte. So I don't know that I'll ever be super girly. Cuz even like if I'm not, on stage in a bikini and heels, I mean, I'm in sweats and baggy tees every day. That's just how I'm comfortable. And if I'm going out, I'll wear like something like a plain tank top and that kind of thing. But I don't know that I'll ever be super, super girly. But like I've definitely gotten more feminine and more girly as it's gone on. And it's different, but it's not drastic to the point that like not my friends don't even notice kind of thing. So, and I think a lot of it too was just more self-care rather than super feminine. So like I just kind of started like taking care of my hair better and now my hair is like super long and pretty on its own and like getting facial care routines in place and stuff and that was just things that I didn't care about before. But they definitely help with my overall look when I go to a stage.
That is why I think the guys have it so easy when it comes to that department for bodybuilding. They don't have to do anything about their hair. They don't have to really do unless their hair is just like absolute dog crap. Where
Right.
it's hard to achieve that level of where like you and then like no facial things or anything. It's like, oh my god, they just have to put on their trunks basically and just walk on stage. So
Yeah.
that's why I like having a lot of the females on because like it's just so much more of a different sport between the sexes because like yeah, the men don't have to worry about so much, and for the women, yeah, it's like you have to get glammed up, you have to do all that stuff. I mean, it's just an extra added layer to it. But out of your bikini poses, what was your favorite pose and what was your least favorite?
My favorite's definitely the front pose. I just like how I look in the front pose the best. And my least favorite is my back pose. It's the hardest for me to do because I also have a leg that's shorter than the other. So that kind of stuff gets tweaked all the time. I have to put all my weight on one side so my hips look even and one leg has to be straight, one leg has to be bent. So it's a lot of little things in my back pose that can be, if I forget to do them, I won't look even. So the back pose is definitely my
So
hardest.
one leg bigger than one leg longer than the other. Is it like super noticeable? Is it just because of posing that you really have that you really notice it?
I definitely originally noticed it because of posing,
Okay.
but now I think that I'm like aware of it. I notice it in terms of like the development of one leg over the other.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, how do you train that then? Because I don't know if there'd be like anything different that you have to do, or have you found different ways to try to compensate a little bit?
Yeah, so like my left leg hamstrings are definitely more developed than my right because it's the longer leg. So on some of those movements, when you're doing, double legged movements, my left kind of will overcompensate for the height difference in my right. So like my right will come in once it's there. So I have to really, the mind to muscle connection, I have to really think about feeling it in my right leg. Because I already know the left leg's going to do the work. I have to get my right leg to actually kick in so I don't lose that development. And then adding in single leg stuff to help that development.
I mean, you are talking to one of the weirdest coordinated persons on the planet. I am, because like I've never mentioned this on the podcast, but I throw with my right hand, I write with my
Okay.
left hand, I kick with my left foot, but when I run, I lead with my right foot.
Interesting.
So it's all just a big jumble. We're literally
Yeah,
like, I don't get it. Like, I don't have any imbalances, I don't think, although I am a little pigeon-toed, which is one thing that my parents like to make fun of me for every once in a
sure.
while. But, you know, there's that. So, yeah, it is just fascinating. But when you are walking on that stage, what is that feeling like for you? Because, I mean, like, let's be honest, preps are not fun. And anyone that says I enjoy preps and I love them, I know an address to an insane asylum, and I will gladly drive you there because for the safety of the public. But
Right.
what is that moment like for you when you get to walk up on that stage and, you know, show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on?
To be honest, I my first couple ones, I kind of blacked out. Like it was showtime, and you kind of just go into airplane mode of this is what I have to do, and then I get off. This last one, I did a national show. It was my first ever national show, so it's a lot bigger. It's recorded. There's all these big names there. The stage is beautiful, and it's like this big deal. And getting up on that stage and just being more present because I've done a couple shows now. I'm not as like airplane mode. Um, it's fun. I mean, it's seeing the judges, especially when you're doing like your single routine, they're only looking at you. So that is your shot, to show them what you worked on, to show them what you got, how far you came. Um, Making that eye contact and just having fun. That's mostly what I just try to do once I get to that point. It's like the hard work is done. I This is my shot here. I'm going to go up on stage. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to give them my personality and my flair. And then after, I get to eat whatever I want. So,
Well, you thought of my next question perfectly because this is my favorite question to ask. What is your go-to post-show meal?
burger every time. I just always want something greasy, and I love tater tots or french fries. So I'm not one for like, I don't want to go to like a fancy sit down meal. I want like bar food. That's what I want to have. And then usually some form of like cheesecake, brownie, or cookie with ice cream is typically what I'm going to eat.
How does your body deal with that later in the night? Because I know some people, like, it's interesting when you go from dieting down to all of a sudden just picking out for a night when it comes to your body's reaction.
Yeah, some people can get really sick when they do that kind of thing. I don't. Like, my body digests it all just fine, and unless I mean, the only time I ever get uncomfortable is if I overeat, which sometimes I do after a show. Like, I'll sit and finish every single thing that I ordered, and I probably shouldn't. Um, but yeah, my body does fine. Not everybody's will. I think it's just important to know how your body reacts to certain things. Like, I would never get a steak because my body doesn't react well to red meat. And like burgers for some reason are fine, but like something like steak does not sit well. Um, so I kind of just stick to burgers because I know it doesn't bother me, or some kind of like chicken sandwich. As long as I get fries or tater tots, I'm usually okay.
I mean, I judge every restaurant that I've ever been to on their hamburgers. That's how I judge the restaurant. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing else really for me. I mean, now for my brother's birthday a couple weeks ago, we had to go to get Mexican, and I just told him, like, I don't even remember what I got, but I figure out some way to make it like a little bit like that because yeah, that is my go-to food as well. But I mean, another thing that I love to talk about is like most people do not understand that look that you present on stage, it's not sustainable. You're not going to look like that 24/7, unfortunately. And I mean, a lot of people, when they first get in this lifestyle, if they don't have that guidance, they fall into that trap of, trying to maintain this look, which is like, let's be honest, it's not a healthy look. You're not supposed to be able to maintain it for that long. But what was that like when you first realized that, like, hey, this is a look that, as hard as I work on it, I'm not going to be able to maintain it? And has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career's gone on?
Yeah. It's a lot of, you hear it all the time, but it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that gets like really drilled in over the season of bulking, because when you're bulking, the entire goal is to put on weight. and you're going to put on muscle, but you're also going to put on fat. So you are going to look totally different than you did when you were on stage. I mean, you're talking 15, 20, 25 pounds, if not more, heavier than you were at the time. And the only tough part for me, I don't mind bulking, at least not to the size that I got. Because I'm about 5'3" and I got up to 135. So I mean, none of my stuff fit me anymore, but I was okay with it. And I think a lot of the reason why I was okay with it is because it was winter and here it's cold. Like, we don't have a reason to, be in tank tops.
Oh yeah, it's sweater weather for more than half the year. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I think that's probably a big reason why it didn't bother me, because I were covered 7 months out of the year. But part of the hardest part for me this last prep was I wasn't slimming down as quickly. And my body looked very different this time than it did last time, because I actually went through a bulk. So I put on more mass than I think I initially thought I would. And so I was used to seeing myself last year, this tiny 111 pound, 110 pound, just stick. And that's not what I looked like this year. I was fuller, which is essentially what they're looking for, but I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to that look. I was like, no, like, I need to be leaner. I'm not lean enough. I don't look the same. And like, we're our own toughest critic when it comes to that. And I think everybody knows that, everybody says that. I always tell like my friends, my wife and stuff, that like, I wish I could see myself through your guys' eyes, because how you guys look at me, like, and just people that come up to me in the gym, like, oh, you look great and all that kind of stuff. And like, in my head, I'm like, thank you. I don't, though. And
Does
that's
she ever? Does your wife ever have those moments where it's just like, you're an idiot, just look in a damn mirror?
yes. All the time. I mean, through this entire prep, I was like, I'm not going to be lean enough. I'm not going to get there. I'm not going to get there. And she's like, what are you looking at? And she's like, you put on more muscle, you're not going to look like that. And I just, like, those kinds of things, like with that mental game, like going back to that, like, it is hard. It is hard to accept different weights that your body will go to. And every person will struggle with it in bodybuilding. I mean, yes, you get used to it. It's part of the process. It's part of the sport. But I think it's the hardest after that first time. After that first time, when you cut down like that. And that's, for me, it was the first time I've ever seen myself look that way. And it came with just like this newfound confidence in myself, and I felt good in my skin and in my body. So coming into a new prep where I wasn't that small, it was tough. It was definitely something I had to work through. I'm better with it now, because I'm sitting at like 119, which is still 9 pounds heavier than I was last year at this time. So it's a process, but it's just part of that. It all goes back to that mental game, and you just kind of have to beat yourself.
One of the benefits of this podcast is that I tell all my friends I have gotten more women to willingly admit their weight than they ever will in their entire lives. So, that's another funny thing with the sport too, where it's like, yeah, but that whole mental side, especially during off seasons and when you have to put on that. I always compare it to like starting your own business where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. Unfortunately, those two go hand in hand. But before we go to the wrap up questions, I mean, let's be honest. You're not the average looking woman. If you were to walk out in public dressed the way you are right now, I mean, you are going to get stares just because if anyone really sees a muscular woman in public, I mean, it's like, it's not something that you see normally. And I sort of like to equate it to like being a mini celebrity, where it's like, yeah, you are going to get more people's attention just because it's human nature when you see something that's not of the normal to just be like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. What has that been like for you, sort of adjusting to the fact that like, I will now get probably a little bit more attention in my life than I did before I did this lifestyle?
Yeah. I mean, even so, like, this last weekend is the first time I've been out like with my friends in probably 6 to 7 months. And that Saturday was also when I hit 119. It's the lowest I've gotten this year. So I'm smaller than most. Um,
Yeah,
and the
I got about a foot and 85 pounds on her, everyone. So yeah.
yeah, and like the amount of people that come up to me, um, I mean, we went to a beer dabbler. Again, I don't drink, but I go there for fun. I got stopped before even getting in by someone asking me like, "Oh, what do you do? Like, do you powerlift or do you bodybuild?" And that kind of having that conversation.
You
And
give them the golden response of I've never touched a weight in my life. I don't even know what working out is.
yeah, I tell them they're fake. I and then just being at the bar later at night, like just these random people that I've never met. Just I got asked to come play rugby for a team, and I'm like, no, my coach would kill me. That sounds like an injury. That doesn't really go hand in hand with what I do. Um, and just the like, how do you do it, and what are you eating, and what do you lift, and wow, you look great, or wow, you're shredded, and how do I get abs, and all of these questions that like that's more than a 2-second conversation that we're gonna have. Um, and I want to do that. You should train me, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's definitely different. When I'm this lean is when I get the most people coming up to me. When I'm in a bulking season, barely anybody will come up to me because your body doesn't look the same, right? Like you're fluffier. It just doesn't look like I do right now. So it's definitely when I get leaner that I get a lot more questions. I get a lot more comments. And a lot more questions for like, can you help me? And that kind of thing, which is totally fine. It's kind of comes with the territory. And when you look a certain way, people will want to look like that.
Yep, I'm in my bulk as well. I'm about 10 pounds down from my heaviest that I was, but I'm going to a family event on Thursday, and I will hate it because everyone that sees me there will be like, Ryan, are you still working out? And I'm just like, I swear to God, I am. I swear to God,
Yeah.
I am. Like, it
Yep.
just give me like 3 months or something like that, and then just look when I'll be about like 15 to 20 pounds less than I'm at. So yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about. Whereas you get a little bit more heavier, people are just like, wait, what's going on here? And you're just like, it
Yeah.
has to happen. Like I can't stay. I can't have a 6-pack or 8-pack. Like all year round. Now some people, those genetic freaks that I never want to talk about because I hate them. I've had 2 of them on the podcast. Or one of them, I was like, there's no way that's you're able to do this. And they showed me a photo of them when they were like 10 years old and they had like an 8-pack, and I was like, okay, this is BS. Just get off my podcast. Like
Yeah.
I'm done talking to you. So there's always one of those running around there. But I mean, you mentioned it before, and I hate cardio as well. I mean, when I say cardio, I mean actual running. I live next to a nature park, so I go on walks nightly there almost. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you do have to sign a deal with the devil when it comes to cardio.
Yeah. Once when I started, it was a lot of running because I had a lot of weight to lose when I started. Because when I started, I was like 140, 145, but like not in the way that I was when I bulked. Um, so running is the fastest way to get the fat off. And at that point, like I hadn't been lifting long enough that like sure I had a base of muscle, but nothing, like I do now. So I started to like running more if I can run outside. Sitting in a treadmill is tough for me, just kind of like
If
staring.
I don't have a TV show or music or whatever like that, it is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I actually do stairs. So if I had to pick my cardio, it would be stairs. And it's kind of funny because I used to hate them. But I've realized as I've been lifting that all the things that I hated because I wasn't good at it. And that was just it. Like the stairs were the bane of my existence when I started. They were tiring. I couldn't go past like a level 4 without feeling like I'm going to pass out. And, now I'm at a level 10 for 30 minutes. And it just got easier as time went on. So cardio definitely gets better. You're just like your heart gets better at it. Your lungs get more used to it. But it's definitely really hard in the beginning.
Yep, it's a necessary evil, but I will still dread it to the. I've always made the joke to friends like you're gonna have to chase me with a knife if you want to see me run. That's about the only.
Yeah.
That's one of the only opportunities that you'll really see it. But I mean, sleep is the most important thing in this lifestyle and just in life in general. Anyone disagrees with me on that, pull an all-nighter and then tell me how that worked out for you going to the gym the next day. But I mean, like, let's be honest. You have 3 dogs. You have a cat. People don't understand. And I tell this to my friends. We're like, oh my god, we just moved in together, and we want to get like a pet or something like that. I always warn them. I say, just remember, their sleep schedule becomes your sleep schedule when you get them. So how do you deal with the whole sleep aspect? Because like when you're on prep, people don't understand. It sort of doesn't make sense to some people, but like you could be so tired that you can't sleep. And I know a lot of people are like, how is that even possible? But like that's a thing that a lot of people on prep discover. But how do you deal with sleep in this lifestyle?
So I actually also have anxiety, which comes with insomnia. Um, so for a while, my insomnia comes and goes. I don't have it constantly or anything like that. And like I have medications to help me fall asleep. Um, but the most helpful thing was definitely a good bed. I'm a really hot sleeper. So obviously, if your body temperature, if you're not comfortable, you're not going to sleep. If you're too hot, you're too cold, it's just not going to happen. So with me, I'm a super hot sleeper. So I actually had to get like a cooling pad on my side to cool my body down because otherwise I just wouldn't sleep. And then I also take a supplement called Calm, which has magnesium in it and a bunch of other things. And ever since taking that, because I started taking that in February of this year, and ever since taking that, I sleep like a rock. I don't wake up in the middle of the night. I fall asleep within the half an hour and I sleep solidly for 8 hours. And it's helped kind of keep that schedule of like, I go to bed anywhere between 11:30 and 12:30 and I wake up around 7:30 in the morning. And I have that schedule even on the weekend when I don't set an alarm. Um, and I definitely noticed like this past weekend we were out on Saturday and I don't think I went to bed till like 3 a.m. And yesterday I was lights out by 8:30. I was so tired still. My body still needed to recover. Um, and I felt, like on Sunday when I didn't sleep that long, like I felt like trash. And it just sleep is sleep is another one of those things. When I started, I didn't realize how important it was. It was just kind of like something you do. Like, yeah, you got to sleep. Everybody knows that. Um, and everybody's different. Everybody needs different amounts of sleep. I'm one of those people that's good on 8. So I do everything in my power to at least get 8. Otherwise, I am tired.
Well, you mentioned you're a hot sleeper, and I will just leave you with this story for this question. My parents, if it's during the winter and it's above 10 degrees, they will have the windows open in their room.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
No, they have to be like freezing cold. That's their thing. Like they have to like I don't get. I mean, I'm sort of like that where it's like I have to be sometimes on like the verge of death where like if I have an exposed body part that's not covered up, I might get frostbite, but it's like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's the Minnesotan, I guess, in it. But yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous with sleeping with other people, and that's a whole different tangent in and of itself too. But I mean, I shows how good of a podcaster I am. It took me about 500 podcasts into this before I started to realize that this is a great question to ask because I get this response in my head and I never say it out loud almost every single time I have a bodybuilder on the podcast. Why do they do this to themselves? Why do they push themselves through this? I mean, I hear all these prep brain stories and I hear all the stuff that goes on. I was like, why? I mean, and I know why, obviously, and I have semi lived a somewhat similar lifestyle myself, so I understand it. But like, even then, like when you have those days where you're like, why am I doing this? What is your why that you like to respond to people that might ask you that? Like, Gabby, why do you do this to yourself?
My why is I found so much out about myself through bodybuilding that I lacked before. Like that self confidence I did not have there. I just didn't. I just wasn't confident in myself. I wasn't comfortable in my skin. I wasn't, and not saying that you have to be in shape to do that because I'm confident in myself even when I'm bulking, and I'm not, 100 pounds or whatever it is. It was just something that gave me structure and a goal to work towards especially being like a multi-sport athlete for most of my life, having that missing kind of made me, I don't know, feel a little lost, I guess, the older I got. I was just kind of doing the same things over and over. I was going to work and then I would go out and drink with my friends on the weekend, and it just kind of got old and I was missing something. And this helped me find that something, and it gives me something to drive towards. And I'm one of those people that like I thrive off of goals, and this is just an ongoing goal. This isn't like a you get there and you're done. Like I said before, like this is an ongoing driver that I can always come back to, even if I take a couple years off or whatever it is. And I also like inspiring other people, like my friends, and I help my friends. Like I give my friends workouts and stuff, and they're like when they ask for help, and I like being that person for them, and then like hyping them up when they're getting results and seeing different things, and being that accountability factor to help them. And because a lot of the times like people want to, they just don't know where to start. And it was the same for me. I wouldn't have known. I didn't know where to start 3 years ago, and having a coach and having someone hold you accountable to what you do right and what you do wrong is helpful as well. And um yeah, that's kind of, I needed to gain more confidence in myself, um in the bodybuilding world, and then in my personal life as well. And it because when you're confident in yourself, it helps all aspects of your relationships, not just, it helps with work, my marriage, my friendships, everything. I mean, it helps when you're comfortable in your own skin, and it just helps you be who you are.
I will agree. I have at times at bars seen that non-confident guy walk up to someone, "Hey, can I buy you a drink?" And they're just like, and you're just like, "Come on, you gotta get a little self." So it helps you, yeah, with all aspects of your life. You get a little bit more pep in your step. You're able to, yeah, it's a lot of different things that it's not just the results that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't understand that comes with this sport. I mean, it's a whole lifestyle change, and yeah, I love to bring that out too. Now, the final two questions before we wrap things up. I mean, if someone were to walk up to you and say, "Gabby, we made the decision. You can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it," what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Ooh. That one's tough.
You save the hard ones for the end here.
Yeah.
I can give you my answer while you're thinking.
Okay.
All right. So for me, well, obviously, money they should be paid more. I mean, for my whole spiel with this thing is that if you are a pro in this sport, you should not have to have a regular job. Like it should be provided for you, or like I don't even know if it's like a stipend of just like 30, 40,000 out plus like sponsorships. Like you should be able to just focus on this because people don't understand how much easier this lifestyle is if you don't have to worry about a job, you don't have to worry about any other things. I mean, it would help out these athletes so much. And then also, I know it's human error, and trust me, being a baseball pitcher, there have been times where I have told the catcher, this next pitch, move out of the way. Basically, we're gonna hit the ump, basically, because the guy's just horrible.
Yeah.
But like, I understand, but like human error too. Like you could go to two shows in back-to-back weeks, and you could have the same lineup, and some judges, you might place higher in one show than the other, just because people look for different things. And I just wish there'd be more of like a generalized, like this is exactly the shape that we want, and anything else is like, I mean, this is just exactly what we want, as opposed to like I know every human judge, wants maybe something different than now. Obviously, it's not like drastic where it's like so drastic, but there's just little things too that can make it so that like people know what they're looking for. And a lot of times people go to shows not knowing who the judges are when they're getting started off, and like they would have placed much better had they gone to just a different show just based on the judges.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something with the shows that like I've picked and stuff. They're specific to those judges like muscle. I am bigger up top. That's not, again, it's not typical in bikini athletes. Bikini athletes by standard, we're supposed to be soft.
I can say I was a little shocked when I found out that she was a bikini competitor too. I was like, oh wait, she's not in figure. Like if I took one look at just your upper body, I'd be like, oh yeah, figure competitor.
Yeah. And that's kind of the tough part with it, it's that this is what my body looks like at the end of the day. So I go to judging that will like that, because I'm not going to go in front of someone that I know isn't going to like it, because the shows are expensive on their own, let alone
Yes.
going to one where you're not going to do well. Um, I think like I think for me in the NPC, like just because like I'm not a pro, so in the NPC division, when we go up there to like do our thing, we only have about 15 seconds. And I think it would be cool to like have a little bit longer, like even 20 seconds, 25 seconds, just to give us like a little bit more time on stage because we have worked a long time to get there. And sometimes it's bittersweet when you're only up there for 15 seconds. Um, and that's like your solo stuff is like the fun part. That's where you get to, and typically they're not judging the solo part. So I think adding just a couple more seconds to that, just to have more fun, I think would be fun.
That is the most shocking thing to me too, is like, wait, they put in this much work and they're only on stage for like 15, 20 seconds at times. I was like, that to me was the most shocking thing when I first really, dug deep into this sport, because it's like, yeah, being a baseball, football, basketball player, I mean, like, you're on the stage for, like hours at a time, it seems at
Right.
times. And then like for this, you train even harder than I train probably for any of my sports. And then, you're on there for such a little amount of time. So yeah, that's more props to the guests. But I mean, when we do have you on a year from now, because I'd love to have you on in a year, just sort of give us an update on what you've been up to. Where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to just be at in your overall life? What are some goals you'd like to have achieved when we have you on a year from today?
uh, Hopefully in a year, well, I won't be competing yet in a year. My next show will be August.
Okay.
And I'm that, I mean, it could change, obviously, who knows? Um, but in a year, I mean, I'd love to get that pro card. You know, that's being an NPC athlete. That's kind of what I look forward to. That's what I'm working towards, is getting that stamp of approval to be recognized in the IFBB Pro League. And yeah, I mean, that's where I'm looking to get, at least with the bodybuilding. Obviously, if it doesn't happen next year, that's totally fine too. I actually, after next year, I'm probably going to take a couple years off. And because my wife will be coming back from deployment. So we are going to actually have a honeymoon because we didn't.
To be able to have a spouse that goes overseas. So how, before we wrap things up, that has to add on. So how do you deal with that whole aspect of it too? Because that to me is like, that's crazy in and of itself. It's like having someone for like a year sometimes at a time just away. I've talked to a couple military spouses. Sounds like I do not know how you guys do it.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to competing, it was definitely harder to be on stage without her there. She has done everything she could in when she was here to be at every single one of my shows. I mean, for my first show, she got off at work at 3 a.m. and drove to South Dakota to be there. And
that's true love, because I ain't driving to South Dakota for
yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, so it was definitely different this year. I actually thought, originally going into it, I thought it would be easier because honestly, me being in prep isn't her favorite thing in the world. Especially, and I say prep, like the bulking doesn't matter. I'm not as strict. We can go out to dinner, whatever. When I'm in prep for those 15, 12 weeks, whatever it is, I'm very strict. I don't eat anything out of my plan unless I get the okay. And I'm always in prep in the summer. So it's definitely not her favorite. So I thought it would be a little easier this time around, just with her over there. And then like she doesn't have to worry about going out to dinner with me when I can't. But the bittersweetness was definitely being on stage and just not having like your person there with you. So that was different. But she'll be back next year, so it's okay.
That is just crazy as saying, oh yeah, my wife will be back next year. Just like, what is it? Like, that to me is just like, I have friends that are like, they're their spouse goes on like a 2 week, business trip, and I'm like, okay, that's not like, how do you, that's, they're like, I don't know what to do for like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, well, I've had military people on who's like a year and a year and a half. So, talk to them if you really want to hear it. But that is incredible. But before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Definitely my coach, Christy. When I've mentioned my coach throughout talking with you, like I would not be anywhere near where I am today without her. If you are ever looking to go into bodybuilding, find a good coach. Find a coach that knows what they're doing. Find a coach that knows nutrition and is going to be there for you every step of the way. I think finding a good coach can sometimes be tough. There's a lot out there, but you want someone like Christy. For me, she is available 24/7. It is her full-time job to be there for her clients. And she is awesome. And I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now without her.
Yeah, those coaches, I mean, those are, and I always say, like, it's the significant others, it's the family too. I mean, those are the unsung heroes of this podcast and, the life in general, because they deal with, a lot of stuff. But lastly, I totally forgot to ask this. I mean, what is the judges' feedback that you've normally been getting then? Since you said you're working for your pro card, what has been the one things that they've said, like, oh, this is something that you need to work on?
The leanness in my legs. Hell yeah, the legs are the bane of my existence. They came in on my last national show. That was the best my legs have ever looked. We actually could see tie-ins. So that we're getting there. It's just going to take a little bit. I'd have to come down another probably 4 pounds, and I think that'll be definitely better. Because I was able to ask the judge for my feedback before I went on for finals. Her name is Sandy, and she's like, you know, head top notch up there when it comes to standards and what you're looking for. And I told her my number and what class, and she was like, oh my gosh, your shapes are just great. Just come in leaner. And that's something you can fix.
I have heard about Sandy dozens of times on this podcast, so yeah, and I can verify that. Like, yeah, she's one of the top judges out there. So yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Gabby, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey on this podcast. It's always a delight to have, especially fellow Minnesotans on. But again, I look forward to having you on again. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.